A few weeks ago, my entire world changed. I had been living in my childhood home, just me and my mom, ever since my dad passed away when I was young. Losing him had left a void in both our lives, and we leaned on each other as the years went by. Staying close to home made sense to me. I went to college locally, saved money by living at home, and helped out with household expenses. My mom and I had a good thing going, a simple, stable routine that worked for both of us. About 2 years ago, though, my mom remarried. Her new husband, who I'll call R, entered the picture. At first, I wasn't thrilled about it. It felt strange to have someone else in the house, but I figured that if he made my mom happy, I could accept it. Honestly, R didn't seem like a bad guy at first. He mostly kept to himself and didn't try to impose on me. We had an unspoken understanding. I paid rent for my old room, helped out around the house, and in return, R didn't try to be a father figure. Things between us were neutral, cordial, even, and for the most part, life stayed uneventful. That was until R's daughter, Kay, came into the picture. I knew about Kay vaguely through R's conversations with my mom. She was in her late 20s and had struggled for a while, moving from one job to another and having a hard time getting her life on track. Since she lived in another state, I never thought her situation had anything to do with me. But that all changed one random day when I came home from work to find our entire living room filled with boxes, just an overwhelming amount of them, stacked all over the place. I stood there in disbelief, trying to process what I was looking at, when Kay walked out of the guest room. She was wearing sweatpants and moving around the house like she'd been living there for years. "Oh, hey," she said casually, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Dad said I could move in for a bit. Hope that's cool." Her nonchalance caught me off guard. I struggled to keep my cool, not wanting to explode right then and there. Surely, this was just a temporary situation, right? Maybe she needed a few weeks to figure things out. Still trying to stay calm, I went to find my mom, who was in the backyard watering her plants, acting as if nothing unusual was happening. "Hey, Kay's stuff is all over the living room," I said, trying to sound neutral even though I felt uneasy. "Oh yeah," my mom answered, smiling. She needed a place to stay for a while. I thought it would be good for her to be with family. My stomach tightened. A while? Like, how long? Mom shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I'm not sure yet. It's not a big deal, right? She's family." But it was a big deal. This was still my home, wasn't it? I paid rent, helped with bills, and contributed to running the household, but apparently, none of that mattered. I wanted to argue, but I bit my tongue. Maybe this was temporary. Maybe if I just gave it some time, she'd leave. I didn't want to start a fight over it. However, days turned into weeks, and Kay showed no signs of leaving. In fact, she made herself far more comfortable than I ever expected. She left her stuff everywhere, sprawling across kitchen counters, the bathroom sink, and even taking over the couch, where I used to unwind after work. She'd blast music late at night and take long showers, using up all the hot water. It felt like she assumed the house was hers, and no one seemed to mind. I tried bringing it up with my mom again, hoping she'd understand how frustrated I felt. But every time I mentioned it, she brushed me off. "Kay's going through a tough time," she'd say. "We need to support her." Support her? I was the one working long hours to keep everything afloat. I was paying rent, but I no longer felt like I had a place in my own home. I tried to stay out of Kay's way, avoiding confrontation and hoping that things would eventually return to normal. Then, one day, I came home from work, exhausted after a long shift, only to find my bags packed and sitting by the front door. My suitcases, stuffed with my clothes, computer, and personal belongings, were waiting for me, as if I'd been evicted. Confused and angry, I rushed upstairs to my room, only to find the door half open. Inside, Kay was already moving her stuff into my space. My bed was stripped, and her clothes were filling the closet that used to be mine. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with disbelief. Kay barely looked up, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Dad said you'd be cool with it. I needed more space, so here we are." I felt a wave of heat rise up my neck. "You needed more space?" I snapped. "This is my room. What are you talking about?" Kay didn't even flinch. "Dad said I could have it. You were taking up too much room anyway." Anger and disbelief churned inside me, and I stormed downstairs, desperate for an explanation. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, drinking a beer, looking as relaxed as ever. "Why is my stuff packed up?" I demanded, not bothering to hide my anger. Without even looking at me, R took a slow sip of his drink and said, "Kay needed the room. It's bigger. You'll figure something else out?" I stared at him, struggling to believe what I was hearing. "Figure something else out?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "This is my home. You can't just—" R cut me off, his tone flat and unbothered. "It's my house now. I pay the mortgage, and I decide who stays where. You're an adult. It's time you figured out your own place. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to my mom, who had quietly entered the room by then, standing by the doorway. Mom, are you seriously okay with this? He's kicking me out, your own son. For a moment, I thought she might side with me. Her eyes flicked between me and R, and I held on to a flicker of hope. But then she sighed, lowering her gaze to the floor. Sweetheart, R's right. You're an adult now. It's time for you to find your own place. The finality in her words shattered something inside me. This is my place, I whispered, my voice heavy with disbelief. This is where I grew up? She didn't respond. She just stood there, avoiding my eyes, leaving me to confront the painful reality. My childhood home, the place I thought was my safe haven, was no longer mine. My eyes dropped to the floor, full of shame, but unwilling to meet his gaze. I couldn't stand up to him, not in that moment, not with everything crashing down on me. The betrayal hit harder than I thought anything ever could. It wasn't just her forcing me out, it was my mother too. She was letting it happen, standing there silently as if this was something reasonable. It felt like both of them were turning their backs on me, and I knew there was no point in arguing. My throat tightened with words I couldn't say, but I swallowed them back down. Saying anything would have been useless. I grabbed my bags, feeling the weight of each step as I loaded them into the car. I wasn't even sure where I was going, just that I couldn't stay there. The road stretched ahead in a blur, streetlights flickering above as I drove aimlessly, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. I ended up crashing at a friend's place that night. I didn't talk much, there was nothing I could say that would make sense of what had just happened. All I knew was that everything I thought was stable had shattered. The next few days slipped past in a haze. I didn't sleep much, just lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to untangle the mess in my mind. No matter how hard I tried, I kept circling back to the same thought, my own mother had chosen them over me. She'd let R, the man she married 2 years ago, take control of everything, including decisions about me. In that house, my home, his word had more weight than mine ever did. And Kay, she got exactly what she'd been angling for all along, my room, my space, and by extension, my life. I heard from mutual friends that she'd settled in comfortably, not even pausing to think about the chaos she'd left behind. It was as if my absence didn't matter to anyone in that house. The people I'd grown up with didn't seem to care that I was gone. For a while, I toyed with the idea of going back, storming into that house, demanding my place and at least some kind of explanation. But what would be the point? They had made their choice. I was out, and R had won. Still, something gnawed at me. I needed closure, something to make sense of the betrayal, or at least to understand how my mother could let it happen. A few days later, I picked up the phone and called her. It felt strange, like talking to someone I used to know but had grown distant from. The conversation started slow, both of us dancing around the real issue with meaningless small talk. Neither of us wanted to address what had happened. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. Why did you let him do it, Mom? My voice was low, but the weight of everything I'd been carrying bled through. Why did you let him kick me out? There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, and in my mind, I saw her biting her lip like she always did when she was nervous. I thought it was best for everyone, she said finally, her voice faltering. You're old enough to make it on your own. And Kay, she needed help. I thought a fresh start would be good for you. Her words landed like cold slaps. I wanted to scream at her, tell her how abandoned I felt, how it felt like she'd thrown me away in favor of them. But instead, a bitter laugh slipped out of me, a sound I barely recognized as my own. Good for me? I repeated, my voice hollow. You think throwing me out of my own home, without even asking me, is good for me? Her silence spoke volumes. There was no good reason for what she'd done, and she knew it. She hadn't fought for me. She had let her decide everything, and in the process, I had become nothing more than an inconvenience. I didn't want it to be like this, she whispered, her voice sounding small and distant, like she was asking me to understand. R said you'd be fine, that you'd land on your feet? Hearing her excuse only made the anger swell. Mom, I said sharply, do you even hear yourself? Since when does he get to make decisions for me? I'm your son. Or does that not matter anymore? Her response came slowly, the weight of regret dragging down her words. I don't know what to say. She sounded lost, as if she'd realized too late how much damage had been done. I just wanted everyone to be happy. I scoffed, my patience worn thin. Well, congratulations, Mom. R and K seem pretty happy. But what about me? Did you even think about how this would affect me? Or was I just something in the way? She repeated, almost helplessly, I didn't want it to be this way. But the words felt empty, like she was clinging to an excuse to ease her guilt. In that moment, I understood something I didn't want to admit. There was no apology coming, not the kind I needed. She wasn't going to stand up for me, not now, not ever. She had already made her choice, and I wasn't the one she chose. I hung up, the silence on the other end lingering long after the call ended. The days that followed blurred together. I stayed at my friend's place, going through the motions, working, eating, sleeping, repeating the same routine over and over. But no matter what I did, the pain didn't fade. It stayed there, heavy and sharp, reminding me with every quiet moment that everything had changed. My home, my family, the people I thought I could count on, none of it was the same anymore. And the worst part was realizing I might never get the closure I was looking for. My own mother abandoned me, not just emotionally but physically, choosing a man she had known for only 2 years over her own child. It wasn't just that she welcomed him into her life, she let him take over mine, too. And the worst part? The house wasn't even hers to give. It was the house my dad bought, the one I grew up in, filled with memories of him before life became complicated. Before everything fell apart, before my dad died and before our moved in, acting like he owned the place. It wasn't just the physical space that changed. It was the way I was treated, like I no longer mattered. My room, my life, my presence, all of it was dismissed as if it had no value. I was pushed out to make room for R and his daughter, Kay, as though the home I had known my entire life no longer belonged to me. I thought about confronting them, just showing up at the front door one day and demanding an explanation, some kind of justification for what they did. But then I imagined how it would play out. R would puff up, throwing his weight around, Kay would smirk from what used to be my bedroom, and my mom would stand there, silent and torn, caught between the family she should have protected and the one she had chosen. But then, something unexpected happened. I got a text from R. It was short, blunt, and as arrogant as I remembered him to be. Asterisk, hope you're doing well. You can come get the rest of your stuff when you're ready? Asterisk. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done or what I'd lost. Just a cold invitation to collect the remnants of my old life. At first, I wanted to ignore the message, to block his number and leave it all behind. But something about it made me snap. That message felt like the last straw, like R was reminding me that he still had control. And I wasn't going to let him have that. Not anymore. The following weekend, I decided to drive back, unannounced. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of dictating when or how I reclaimed my things. As I pulled up to the house, my heart pounded. The driveway was familiar, but the home it led to felt alien, like I was walking into enemy territory. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the front door and let myself in. After all, what were they going to do? Call the cops on me for stepping into the house where I grew up? Kay was sprawled on the couch with her feet on the coffee table, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she rolled her eyes and muttered, asterisk, oh, great. Asterisk, I ignored her. I wasn't here for her approval, and I wasn't going to waste my energy arguing with her. I headed straight to my old room, or what was left of it. The door was half closed, but when I pushed it open, a wave of emotions hit me. Everything that used to be mine, my posters, shelves, desk, was gone. The bed I'd slept in for years had been replaced with hers, and my belongings were shoved carelessly into a corner, like afterthoughts. It wasn't just a room anymore, it was her space now, filled with her mess and her life. It was painfully clear that I had been erased from the home I once knew. Without saying a word, I started packing up the rest of my things. Kay didn't offer to help, not that I expected her to. Why would she? As far as she was concerned, she had already won. R was nowhere to be found, and as for my mom, well, I had no idea if she was even home. And if she was, she certainly wasn't coming out to see me. When I finished loading the last box into my car, I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring at the house. It hit me, standing there, that this wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I had been holding on to a fantasy, a version of my family that no longer existed. I had hoped that maybe things could go back to the way they were, but I realized then that the past was gone, and there was no bringing it back. And strangely, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. Done with R. Done with Kay. And for now, done with my mom. There was no going back, not to the house, not to the family I used to know. I drove away without looking back. It wasn't the kind of ending I had wanted, but it was the one I needed. A clean break. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Since then, I've been staying with friends, saving up for my own place. It's not easy starting over, but at least I'm not stuck somewhere I'm not wanted. I've cut off all contact with R and K completely. As for my mom, I still don't know. Part of me wants to forgive her, to understand why she made the choices she did. But another part of me knows that sometimes, even family can hurt you in ways that take a long time to heal. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. And the people you expect to protect you? Sometimes, they're the ones who let you down the hardest. But I'm figuring things out, one step at a time. And who knows what's next? If you're still here, maybe hit that subscribe button. There's bound to be more drama ahead, and at least this way, you'll get a front row seat to the chaos.